And we're live. So normally I give a few, I'll give them a few minutes to kind of trickle in. I'm hoping that since we're running a little bit late, we will have a few viewers pop in fairly quickly. So, but thanks for you guys taking the time out of your day to do this. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping this is something unique. I'm hoping it's going to give you guys a chance, a platform to put the accumulated 6,000 years worth of living history knowledge out there for folks. So I think it's going to be a good evening. Okay.
I keep hearing this vibration.
That's the mic, I think. It's the computer.
Okay. Because I thought it was coming from that way.
Yes, we got 5 now. All right. So we've got 5 viewers. Everyone's trickling in. I'm going to go ahead and start this thing since we're already running a little bit late due to technical issues. This is the last of this is actually 2 last. It's going to be the last big live feed I do. But it's also, more importantly, the last live feed of our Women's History Month series. And I'm hoping that this is the best one. This is the one I've been most nervous and excited about, bar none. So tonight we have a roundtable discussion. We've got a panel of, how many folks we got here? 6, 7, 8, I guess. I can't math.
From what I can see of your screen, it looks like 6 on your screen plus me is 7.
Okay, so 8. Okay, cool. So we got 7 wonderful individuals on here
Maybe
to talk,
8, yeah.
To talk about women in the hobby and where we've come from, where we're going, that sort of thing. So we're going to start off with thanking them all for joining us because we all have busy schedules. Why don't we start off by having everyone introduce themselves, tell the audience your primary area of interest of living history, maybe what group you belong to, and how many years you've been doing it. Do you want to start, Di?
Okay. So I'm Diana Campbell. I actually didn't start off as reenacting. I started off in the early 2000s doing presentations at nursing homes and churches about 1940s dance demos, fashion shows, things like that. I've gone to the Reading Air Show almost since its conception as a spectator with my father. Fell in love with the Memphis Belle because it was one thing he and I had in common is we both loved World War II and the aircraft. And it was in 2005 that I met Bob, and he got me into actual reenacting. And my first reenactment was actually a training event with his Vietnam group where I was the correspondent. They outfitted me, brought me out, took me out in pitch dark, and I was captured because the guys didn't know how to be quiet. And I'm just like, this does not seem right. But yes, so I have done Vietnam War correspondent. I got into World War II starting with Polish, moved to British ATS, WAF, Wrens, Civil War, Napoleonic camp follower. So it's been quite diverse.
But your main interest and love is Brit.
Yes.
Anything Brit.
Because ever since the child, I've also done home front, and I've gotten into domestic history.
Okay. All right. How many years? So 05 to
almost 20.
Okay. All right. So who wants to go next?
Just introduce. It'll be easier.
Sarah, why don't you go next? We'll just go across the screen like that.
Okay. I started reenacting in War of 1812 about 95. I was in middle school, and I started doing volunteer work at Fort Meigs in Perrysburg, Ohio, which is Northwest Ohio. I did a lot of just tour guiding and support stuff at events. And then they had a timeline event. And I knew my great uncle had served in the Air Corps in World War II. I knew his brother had served in the Navy in World War II. I didn't really know what they did. I adored both men and loved spending time with them. But I didn't know much about their service, but I was interested in it. But the real thing was I loved warbirds. My dad would always take me to see the warbirds when they came in. So when the group of guys that were really hot that were my age showed up, I was like, oh yeah, I want to do this World War II reenacting thing. And that was at the timeline event at the site. I was about 17, 16, and I started researching and started collecting at that point. My first event was probably in 2000. I went to a big collecting event that no longer exists in Ohio. And then from there, I went to the Timeline event and it just kept rolling. I was doing war correspondent. I did war correspondent for many, many years. I was one of the only women in the Midwest doing it. And I don't think there's many women in the country doing it at first. I know there's at least one other on the East Coast. And it was hard. I was often the only woman at events. It was not unusual. It got bigger. I remember when it started growing and seeing more women at events, and that was kind of neat. That was started right around, Diana, when you started, actually, 2004, 2005. And it's grown spectacularly for that since then. And then I took a break in 2011 when I got pregnant with my oldest and didn't come back until 2019. And of course the pandemic hit, and now I'm back in it more full time.
And you're primarily doing wax stuff now, aren't you? You're still doing the war correspondent.
Yeah, so I stopped doing war correspondent when it got so popular, and I started focusing on Women's Marine Corps Reserve, which is still my prime research focus. My grandfather was a Marine in Korea. He was one of the most influential men in my life growing up, and I was always into the whole Marine Corps ethos and everything. So that's why I focused on that. But then I met up with Molly, who I initially hated, and now we're really good friends. But she got me into the wax stuff. I'd always had wax collection and wax stuff because war correspondent is so wax adjacent. And from there, it just took off. And now I'm currently the acting CEO of First Whack HQ Company. So that's where I'm at.
Congrats. All right.
I guess.
All right. So I'm Stormy Suter Brown. Most people say my last name wrong. I started reenacting in 1996. I was a teenager at the time. So a big challenge at the time was getting lifts to events because I couldn't drive yet. So it's come a long way. I was primarily doing Civil War at the time. Around 2005, I started doing World War II, but I was really not focused on one impression. I did a lot of Red Cross stuff, Wave, Home Front, that kind of thing. In 2008, I went to work for the Army at the Airborne and Special Operations Museum in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And we had all this wax stuff in our collection that just never saw the light of day. So I took it on as a personal mission to let the wax story be known at that museum. In 2010, I left that museum, kind of let WAC fall to the wayside for a while, though I was still backseat interested while I worked on other impressions and other eras. And then around 2017, 2018, I got back into the WAC, and that's now really the only era and impression I put a lot of energy and effort into. It's very all-consuming and quite passionate about it.
All right. Hannah, you're next.
My name is Hannah Ramey. I focus on World War II WAC. I started in about 2019 as 18th century, and I love it, but always gravitated towards the 1940s with home and lifestyle and things. I met Stormy in, I think, June, of 2019. She said, "You should be a WAC." And I said, "Give me 1 year." I was going through some personal stuff. I said, "Give me 1 year, I can't guarantee it." That following September, I was fully kitted out with my own gear at a tactical event, and it's just been knee deep in from there, and that's what I focus on.
I couldn't ask for a better WAC.
Oh, you're too kind.
All right, Laura, you're next.
I'm Laura McGinnis Garber. I have been reenacting. Bob, what year did you get married?
09.
So I've been reenacting. I started reenacting in 2008. And in the fall of 09, I was at an event with my really crappy first group, and Bob and Diana rescued me from doing Army Nurse with this absolutely horrendous group.
Was this Williamsport?
Yes,
That was fun.
with their black jump boots
Yeah.
and ripstop Army Nurse Corps uniform.
And you and I recreated a photo.
Yes, and Diana and I recreated a photo. And I was initially doing Army Nurse Corps, and since 2013, when I got married, I started doing WAC more often because my husband has a switchboard and is all things Signal Corps, and he needed somebody to help run the switchboard, and I was the most convenient person to train.
All
I
right.
don't know what that's like.
All right, Jenny, you're on deck.
All right, yes, I am Jenny. I've been reenacting since 2010. I started with Civil War. I was just a civilian then. And then in 2018, I started doing German World War II. My primary impression that I really like to do is German civilian. My other one is SS Hellfriend.
All right, Junior, you're up, Elena.
I'm Elena Strock, and I've actually been doing this for a little under 2 years now, but I've always had an interest in it, but finally got into it a little under 2 years ago. I mainly do only Eastern Europe, World War I and World War II. So I do Polish, 1939, right before the invasion, and the Polish in the Red Army during 1943. And I also do Red Army infantry, and I portray a musician. I do civilian 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I am also starting to do World War I by doing a female officer impression that would be under the Ukrainian Sich, which is under the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
And as a novice, doing her infantry training, she rocked the field.
She did. All right. So now that we've kind of gotten everyone's background, and it's a pretty wide gambit in here, I'm curious to notice, what are some of the big differences
Who's in
you...
the bottom block there?
That's Jenny.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't see. I just see like he went across and then there's somebody on the bottom.
Yeah, that's Jenny.
Okay.
All right. So with that in mind, I'm curious, what are some of the big differences you've seen from when you started until now, and how's it grown and improved for women in the hobby over that period of time?
Okay.
And we'll start with you and kind of go how we just did this.
Okay. So when I started, there really wasn't too many of what I would call a women's group. And actually, except for your Vietnam group, which welcomed me and took me out into the mud, when I started World War II, I was the only woman in each of the units I joined. I was thrown into bivvy tents while everybody else had bell tents and cots. I was on the ground. And really, even going into Polish and British, there were no uniforms. The reproductions were pathetic. We were basically dressing me out in menswear, trying to come up like I had no real impression because I always had to wear BD. And the guys had no place for me, it seemed. When I got into ATS and started building my way up and getting originals that I could afford or find and getting the uniforms, I actually almost felt like I was threatening some of the women's groups because, I mean, they were literally poking and prodding everything that I was wearing, telling me what to do despite all of my research. Because again, it's like there was a women's group or two, and then I dared to get into somebody else's unit. And then when things seemed to fall apart from there, I just built my own unit.
Okay. What are some of the big differences you see now compared to when you started?
Women have more of a place.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just thrown to the side. They're not expected to just do women's roles. And there is actually a wider variety of things that we can do. Like more opportunity to go into the field if they want to go into the field. Despite lack of resources, there's still more resources for uniforms that existed than when I first got into it.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have to rely 100% on 100-year-old uniforms. even in Civil War, it's like you had to belong to somebody and have women's jobs, and then women just already decide, you know what? We didn't just do all of this stuff. There was more to us than what the guys told us with cooking and cleaning, and they were coming up with ideas, and people were starting to welcome them.
Okay.
Whereas before, it's just like, yeah, we'll take you on. We have no place for you. Go off to the side and figure it out.
Okay. All right, Sarah. This is one of the ones I've been looking forward to.
So, Winter Lull 2001, as one of my very first events, I was in field gear, and I was the only woman at the event, the only woman at Friday night. I roll in, and I'm all nervous with my guy friends and everything, and I'm all excited. And we registered, and I had to go back into registration for something. And I walk in behind the unit register, who's just so livid that I'm there because I didn't know my unit head had registered me as S. Westrick and not by my first name. So they didn't realize there had a woman there. And he says, the only place for a woman at this event is in front of me on their knees in a skirt. So
Ouch.
I'd like
Mine
to
isn't
think
that
that
bad.
somebody would get thrown out of an event for saying that now and not be running it.
Yeah.
But that's what it was like when I started. And maybe that's just Indiana. Maybe that's just the Midwest. Maybe it was better East. But
You reminded me, because one time when I was doing Vietnam War correspondent, I signed up to go to a tactical. And the minute I signed up, they basically said, here's your money back. We're not letting you out in the field.
I remember that.
I didn't think about that until you said you registered and were turned. Yeah.
Well, he didn't turn me away because I was there. He didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
He was pissed. And I faced a lot of that. I had to carry around a research book to justify my impression because nobody knew what it was. Nobody had seen it yet. I carried Nancy Sorrell's Women Who Wrote the War 4 years in my Musette book bag, just because people were like, this doesn't exist. You made this up. No, I didn't. These women existed. They were out there. Here's the book. There's pictures in it because I doubt you can read.
That was the best comeback.
But it was hard. It got better. And then you're talking about the women's group poking and prodding. I remember literally getting one of my original uniforms poked at and prodded, and they were arguing over the buttons. I'm like, it's theater made. It's not whack. It is whack, but it's whack theater made. That's why I'm wearing it. And I think the woman was mostly disgusted that I could wear it. More than anything, because there were no reproductions. And to me, that's the biggest change. There are reproductions available for whack stuff and women's army stuff. There were no reproductions. So you were in originals, or you sewed a couple of, you were piecing things together if you could and letting things out, cheating things with rubber bands at the waist, which I still do occasionally.
The 20-foot rule. Nobody will notice if they can't recognize it if they're not up close.
If it's under the jacket, nobody can tell. But yeah, now there's a lot of reproductions available. I remember Web House had reproduction HBTs first, and that was the biggest deal. And now I don't even think they exist. Lots of people have reproductions women's HBTs. You can choose what company to go to. You compare companies now. I'm like, there's options.
Yeah.
There weren't options. People waited months to try to get uniforms from Warhouse, and they didn't deliver them. They just never showed up. And now you can choose who you get your uniform from, your jacket. Jerry Lee came out with shoes, and I got one of the first pairs, and it was huge.
I think I used some of those for my ATS.
That was your first pair of ATS shoes, and I think we just retired them like a year and a half ago.
No, they fell apart.
I wore mine until they literally fell apart, and they wore iron until there's no leather left to patch or sew back together.
Yeah. I replaced the soles twice.
Yeah.
And then it was beyond repair.
Yeah, I sewed them back together until they're like, look, it's a rut. It's falling apart. I can't sew where there's no leather to sew. But it was just different. And the attitudes have gotten so much better. And, that made me bitter at one point, and I had to get over that. Because it's like, well, these ladies didn't have to pay their dues like I did. Well, I had to get past that. I really did, because I didn't want to be a gatekeeper. It's a good that they didn't have to pay their dues like I did.
Yeah.
That was a good thing. But yeah, seeing the same guys that told me I had no place at an event going, "Oh, look at you, sweetie, you're so cute." that has given me pause a couple times.
All right.
But we can move on to the next person. But the reproductions definitely, and the improvement of people's attitudes and more acceptance. Those are the big things I've seen change.
And I would echo that. It was starting to go that way when I got out in 15, and when I came back in 19, it was light years away. And I segue into Stormy and Hannah in a minute. I went to a field. One of my first events back was in Field, North Carolina. I hadn't been to a field event at that point in almost 7 years. And I got there, and they're running switchboards. They're doing admin. You wouldn't have seen that in 2013, the last time I went out in the field. It just wouldn't have happened. It was a tactical guys only. And so I thought that was a huge thing when I saw that when I came back. So Stormy, I'm curious to hear what it was like when you started and what you've seen change.
Yeah. So when I first started, at least down here in North Carolina, I don't know if there was another woman in the whole state who was doing World War II at all. If they were here, I'd never managed to meet them. So just numbers, like there's so many more people now that are interested in doing anything. And because there was so few of us, one of us, just showing up was good enough. It didn't matter, it was hard to get something that looked authentic. So it didn't matter what you showed up in, you showed up. And it was very much a mixed bag that you didn't know how people would receive you. A lot of people were very welcoming and encouraging, but then there was also a lot of people that just catcalled you and, hello nurse, and are you here to be a pinup girl and all that stuff. They couldn't take you seriously. And then not just with the reenactors, but like the biggest change I've seen reenacting has been with the spectators. Like when I got back to WAC, I expected the same experience I'd been before, which was all day long repeating over and over. No, women actually were in the Army. No, we were really there. This is really what they wore. This is really what they look like. And especially starting out right outside of a very large military base, I'd get people coming up extremely angry at me for wearing what I was wearing. They were like, women did not do this. And they'd be like in my face, scary. It was scary. And I'd always have to have somebody I knew nearby to kind of keep me safe, which how can you really be fully participating in your hobby whenever, you might need somebody to come call off some angry guy. So it's just, I wouldn't say that we don't have further to go because, you still encounter not great people, but the overall knowledge of most people knowing that women actually were a part of World War II and then just wanting to be accepting of us and include us. Like at Enfield, like when we first started going, we were like, these guys they're not gonna take us seriously. They're not gonna let us work. And instead they're like, this is the best thing ever. We're so glad you're here. So attitudes have definitely changed, and we'll keep changing the people who still have the old attitudes.
Well, I'm going to give your partner a chance to chime in. Hannah, what do you have to add?
I haven't been in here in the reenacting world long enough to really see growth because most of it was during a pandemic. So I haven't really seen growth that I can measure. I probably have, but I haven't been able to pinpoint it yet of what it is. But I can only see really the growth of what the girls can offer in World War II. So the growth of themselves, it's really just the girls are the only thing holding themselves back. There's always room to do better. If you talk to me really at all in any kind of conversation, you will come to learn that my kind of motto of anything is do better. And you can have that as we can do better as an interpretation or as a reenactor, or we can do better as we have learned this lesson, we can do better next time. So you can take that either way. So the growth really that I have seen is how women or myself can grow and do better in this field.
Okay. All right, Laura.
So I started off with a very horrible group, like I said, telling me what I should wear. It was sponsored by a store that sold militaria, and I don't, I know they didn't have Hannah's do better. I look at my pictures from the first event and I just cringe, and it's like, okay, I keep doing better. But I've definitely seen some changes in the hobby for the better. Uh, the past couple of years, no guy has come up to me at an event and petted my hair and said, "Hey, doll." Like, the man seriously smoked at least 3 packs of cigarettes a day and came up to me and started touching my hair and like wanting to follow me around. And I had to get some guy friends to chase him off. Um, and I just feel like there's still room to grow, but I'm lucky that I haven't had some of the more horrible experiences like Sarah had.
Jenny, you're up.
So when I started in 2010, when I did Civil War, there was a lot of women in the group, and I was very lucky with the just social wise getting along with them. I was very lucky with that. But boy, starting off, historical authenticity and accuracy was pretty low on the bar. Part of it was there weren't too many resources available that were easy to get. And reproductions, looking at it, the availability of it now, really, really good now. Man, if I were to start over from scratch today, I would definitely have more options available to me, which is really exciting, especially if you love to shop like I do. And as far as like harassment from other people, I've been pretty lucky. I really don't get a lot of harassment from men, but part of it I know how to dish it right back. All I do is work with men, so I've learned from the finest on how to get even. And bullying, I've had more bad experiences with women than men. I have run into some women where they don't want other women in the hobby, which is kind of frustrating. I remember my first World War II event, meeting some of the other women that did the female impressions. I was told I couldn't do German because my hips were too narrow. I'm like, well, this is starting off on a really good footing. But, oh boy.
I'll get my scratch pad. I gotta take notes.
So no, it's I just been very careful about who I mix with and meet and greet, and yeah. And I know there's some bad apples in the hobby, but I've been very fortunate. I have some pretty good friends in the hobby that kind of keep me on the straight and narrow, keep away from the creeps and towards the good eggs.
Awesome. That's great. All right, Elena, I don't think you're the most junior, but to me, you're the most junior, so you're up.
Well, I guess because I haven't been in it as long, I could talk more about my experience with like tacticals and stuff. Because with me, I kind of refuse to do nurse. I refuse to do anything backlines. I always want to be in combat because I want to show that women were also in combat. I think it's a huge thing for that, especially because I'm a very small person, so a lot of people underestimate me. So I want to go past that and just show that I can do it. But I've always had a pretty decent experience, especially too. I think it helps a little bit that maybe not everybody's able to tell I'm a woman right away because of my hair, but usually once they find out, sometimes they change a little because they find out I'm a woman. But otherwise, you could kind of dish out who the good and bad people are from that, at least in my experience. But I feel like things are a lot better than what I've heard that they were in the past, but they could still improve a lot. Because outside of like American and German impressions, it's kind of hard to get stuff for women still. Like, especially because I do Polish, it's still very, very, very hard to get stuff for that, even though it is kind of niche. But a lot of the times, me and my friend make almost all of our stuff, or it has to be completely specially made. But I will say like luckily with Soviets is becoming a lot more common for women to do because they're able to do a lot. There you get a lot of people like Bob literally making these uniforms and everything, and it makes it a lot easier for women to get into it.
Yeah, and with the Soviets, they were, in theory, more welcoming because they needed the women. That women going out in the field, the Soviet units aren't going to turn them away, and they actually, at least with the Ninth Guards, are definitely more protective of the women.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say,
Yes.
one thing that just is such a, to me, is a night and day difference. When I started doing Soviet, I'd come from doing American and Brit for years. And there was, even though you might have women in the unit, there was a clear delineation.
Yeah.
Yeah, girls were in this tent, boys were in this tent. And the first event I ever went to, they were intermixed. You had a couple of girls racked out in the back corner, but it was the same open dugout. And it's kind of cool to see that, because I can only imagine a Soviet unit going to an event, like a barracks type of event, and being told, yeah, your girls have to stay over here. They can't stay in your barracks with you. That's not going to fly. Most Soviet units are going to say, well, I guess we're not coming. Either we're all bunking together or we're not bunking together at all. So that was definitely a culture shock for me getting into it.
Yeah. But there's one thing I want to say is I'm actually pretty amazed that in the almost 20 years I've done this, things I have forgotten or chosen to forget. Like, until Sarah said something about registering for that tactical, I didn't even remember the Vietnam one. But I do remember the more others talked, and some of us who have been in this longer, when you are by yourself, you almost felt like you didn't have a voice. Like, I remember my first gap, I showed up in civilian for the day. But the year I showed up in a uniform, and I was not one of the two women's groups, and there was only like a half a dozen of us who were actually dared to do a women's impression and not be part of a women's group. Because if you wanted to do a tactical back then, you had to dress as a man and be a man. Like, you literally had to pretend you were a man to go out there and find a unit that was willing to kind of let you do it.
Yeah.
But even among the women's groups, those 6 of us were told, there's space down here, but we don't want you around us. We
Yeah,
have
there were
ourselves the second floor rejects.
We were looked down like as, I don't want to say, we're like the trash of the barracks.
Yeah, we were.
And I kind of enjoyed being barracks trash.
So
honestly.
did I.
I
And
remember
it's
at
like
one
talking
point,
to everybody, that's where I started finding my voice. Like,
I
until
remember at
that
one
moment,
point,
this quiet little introvert wouldn't stand up to anything. But that was the year I started bringing more girls into doing what I was doing. Until
well, that's the year you and I
actually
did
had my own
triage for all the
unit.
girls coming in.
Yeah.
We did triage. You, me, and Martha Mayhew did triage on all the girls coming in from some of the other groups that they were just getting ultimately bullied and rejected from.
And then you had the one woman who was like, her husband dropped her off, and she's like, they told me you would tell me what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And she had his credit card, and we took her shopping.
I'll never forget that. I'll never forget sitting on Marty Mayhew's Foot Locker with a beer in my hand, and this poor woman shows up. She had a pillow and a suitcase, which I think had a pair of socks, a pair of underwear, and a toothbrush in it.
We took her shopping. She chose an impression. And when her husband came by and realized the impression had nothing to do with his unit, she stood up for herself because we were there backing her. Mm-hmm. And when I brought my girls in and more people were doing ATS with me and actually leaving the other groups, they got so ticked off. But because I was part of that first, second floor reject, I had found a voice and learned to stand up for myself. Yeah. And that's the one thing I've actually heard with some of these people, like everybody who has already spoken. You experience this by yourself and you're trying to prove yourself and no one's listening, but eventually you just get stronger and find your voice.
I threatened to go, they kept turning the lights on and off on me at night to kind of mess with me. So I threatened to throw a trash can down the middle of the barracks if they kept doing it, because they were doing, they always slept in. And because I was actually doing stuff and I had a function at the event other than to just be pretty or whatever they were spending their evenings doing.
Partying and being pretty.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
I was actually working in the field. I was working with staff and I was functioning. I had to be up at Reveille. So I'd be up at Reveille and have to go around doing stuff. They'd yell at me for making noise. I'm like, well, get the frick out of bed. I mean, it's time to get up. This is an army base.
The best thing that happened is when
the lights on at night, at midnight, I'd get pissed because I'd be asleep. And
Yeah. No, the best thing that happened was we brought more women to do what we wanted to the point where they just gave us our own barracks.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And we had an amazing barracks that got along beautifully.
And they hated it. We were supposed to
They
be
did.
miserable.
They really did.
And then they made me go to the other barracks. The one year they split us up. The last year I was there.
I remember.
They split us up and they took me to the other barracks because they're mad because Boz's girls registered with me. And because I was working with HQ and a headquarters staff doing command, like actual command field work. And they weren't accepting that as basically an officer on staff.
Yeah.
A field officer. That wasn't okay with them.
No, but they taught us how to fight for ourselves. So
they wouldn't even let me have my breakfast tickets that I was supposed to have because they didn't want me in the mess like I was supposed to be.
wow.
Yeah. It was insane. Like the amount of dislike, I was pretty intense.
Yeah. Elaine, if anybody ever bothers you, I will drive wherever I have to drive, but I have learned how to have a good voice.
Mm-hmm.
I will defend my people.
Well, this segues nicely into my next question, which is, what do you think some of the obstacles are still facing you, women in the hobby? And what sort of resources in terms of repros are you guys in desperate need of?
We know the desperate need. Everybody has asked you to make every woman's uniform under the book.
Fair statement.
Basics, because they always sell out.
I mean, Bob's kids now, you haven't been asked to do Marine Corps yet. You ever figure out Marine Corps, then you'll finally get the one uniform I vowed I would have dropped everything to do American Force.
You make dress whites will make every single woman in this hobby happy, and they're simple white cotton poplin. With gold
buttons. But they keep asking, like, they even want them to do British.
All right, Sarah, what do you think? What do you think some of the biggest obstacles still facing women in the hobby is?
Other women, some of the older women of my generation even have gotten jaded. It's very hard not to. I know it was hard for me. I had to literally stop myself from not turning into the other women. I started it. I've had to go make a lot of apologies to some of the younger women. I did that at D-Day last year. I made apologies to somebody whose throat I jumped down when I was in my gatekeeping phase. Because it's good that you didn't have the struggle I did. And it's better that way. There's still a lot of bad attitudes from the men. There's still some issues where men don't speak up enough on behalf of the women.
Yeah.
And we got to stop you guys from pawning off your girlfriends on us. Like, take your girlfriend seriously as a reenactor if they want to do it. But if they don't want to do it, don't make them do it. And
the one I get with the girlfriends is let the girlfriend do her own research.
Yes.
I started getting the guy saying, my girlfriend wants to do this. What kind of information can I tell her about this? Where can we do this? And my thing is, connect your girlfriend to me.
Yes. That's what I tell people. It's like, what can I get by for my girlfriend? What should my girlfriend wear? She needs to talk to me. I'm not talking to you. That's that simple.
Yeah.
If she wants to do this, she will talk to me. If she doesn't really want to do this and you're going to drag her out, then this isn't going to work. She's going to be miserable. She's going to make everybody around her miserable. She's going to make you miserable too.
Yeah. But I get the apology part because there's a part of me, and Bob will tell you, when it came to reenacting, I would not trust another woman for the longest time.
Oh, yeah, no. That took a while. I think Martha Mayhew and Cassie Junta were the first two. Martha Mayhew was the first, and then Cassie Junta were the first two I knew. Mm-hmm. Because I knew through Bob.
Yeah.
But yeah, long time.
Yeah. All right, Stormy, what do you think the hurdles you guys are learning in the hobby are facing?
So I think from new prospective people trying to get into reenacting, at least down here, World War II is still seen very much as a men's hobby. So just women who are getting interested into reenacting at all, they tend to go to other eras. They tend to not want to actually war reenact. They want to do civilian impressions, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But in terms of trying to grow a unit or a presence in the South, it is a tough sell. I also think that even with the progress we've made, it tends to be that, at least at some sites and in some situations, women are still all kind of lumped together, and y'all go over there because you're all women, and it doesn't matter if the impression is good, the impression is bad, somewhere in between. They just kind of, oh, you're the women, go over there, be pretty, be decorative. And, you know, that's hard to deal with because then you're potentially dealing with mean girls, or just not being able to do your own impression because you have been lumped into that. And then because you mentioned on reproductions, while there are a lot more out there now, a lot of people tend to do very limited runs, or they just don't provide the basics. Like I recently did a post, it is so stupid that we can't find reproduction stockings. They don't exist for an enlisted impression. So you're buying 80-year-old stockings and being like, don't tear, don't tear, don't tear. So a man can enter the hobby and very easily get a basic impression together for not a lot of cost. Whereas like, you know, just to buy stockings, you're talking about 100 years old and $50. So more reproductions would be nice of basic items, as well as like not doing limited runs. You know, if you missed out on getting reproduction shoes, too bad.
Well, the good news is, Stormy, I got the final samples from the mill yesterday, and they are,
Yeah,
Excellent.
it looks good.
So 2 weeks, it's going to take them about 2 weeks to run the Covert Twill for WAC Class A's and the Wool Surge for trousers. And I'm going to co-opt a lot of that probably for making Soviet stuff. But I'll have 300 meters of each coming in the next probably 90 days. So when I get it, the game plan is to probably take 2 weeks off from the day job and just hunker in and pattern and grade and get a few prototypes sent out into the field to probably make one for, I owe Diana and Laura a set, but I'll probably make a setup for you and Stormy and Sarah, probably get a setup for your girls to field test, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Yeah, we definitely need more reproductions and at a reliable cadence.
All right, Hannah, what do you think? I mean, you're kind of a newbie, but I'm curious to see your read on this.
The biggest obstacle, you know, Stormy said, or was it Sarah, was the ladies. It's hard to find people who want to do this, who want to go spend like a weekend out in the field in a tent and be outside and stuff. But specifically with like WAC, I find it hard to find, if you find women who want to dress up in historical clothes, they just want to show up in their historical costume and stand there and look pretty. They don't want to do the job that they are meant to be doing, whether that be switchboard or lineman or like they don't want to do the dirty jobs. They just want to stand there and look pretty. And so I find that to be a struggle because because if somebody messes up, no matter what era, if somebody messes up so badly with their impression, it makes all of the other women look crummy, like they're not caring. That's just my opinion. For the obstacle. For the reproductions of things, we need more. While there's more available that I have learned, because I came in, in 2019 where there was more in beginning. The cuts, some of them are wrong. They're not historically correct. The fabric is not right. I knew somebody who went to a practical event and the rules were, it's immersive, and so the rules were so strict that they needed to change buckles on a piece of gear. And the men could just go out and find this different buckle for their gear. And we're struggling to find shoes and headgear and proper fitting or proper cotton shirtwaists that are not polyester, so the reproductions are available, though they vary in quality and in historical accuracy.
See, one of the things we face with the uniforms is we don't go out in the field. Well, we don't go out in the field as much as men do and play in the dirt. So the uniforms that we do have last longer. And it was Jerry Lee who said he doesn't do a lot of women's stuff because we don't go through it, which means it doesn't make him the money.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty.
So that's what a lot of
attitude.
that's what a lot of the reenacting, like the reproductions are. Because my first ATS came from India. It was pathetic. But if I didn't want to wear a man's uniform, that's what I had.
Yeah.
Then I got the next reproduction right before Mary was born, before I found out I was pregnant. Not 100%. It's a wool polyester mix, very thick and heavy compared to my original, but it was the best reproduction out there at the time.
Yeah.
And it's the one I'll still wear because it's a reproduction and my originals are getting too fragile.
Yeah.
And I don't want to spend another $400 on the better reproductions out there because I only wore that uniform twice. Looks good. I had to make some alterations, but I'll take it.
Okay. Laura, I know you got something to say. You always are a sage of wisdom, so I'd like to hear you chime in.
I would love to see the seersucker reproduced, but finding that
seersucker
fabric,
is making me want to bash my head into a wall.
We can't find the cotton.
That has been the most. Sourcing and getting custom wool was far more straightforward than trying to get seersucker or find it on any of my sources.
I
We're not
bought
wearing
the
polyester in
last
summer.
bit yardage of full cotton seersucker they could find, and they weren't going to restock it. That was me. That was my fault. I bought the last of it.
I can't blame you.
Yeah.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
yes. Footwear has been a battle for as long as I've been reenacting. I started off wearing men's double buckles, and one year at Fort Indian Town Gap, there was a man selling prison shoes, and I just had to switch out the laces. And these have gotten so uncomfortable that I can't wear them anymore. And there's just no good footwear. I got a pair of lately used all heels on duty, but
The S&M,
Yeah, SM Wholesale.
his Oxfords don't bother me, and I'm the one with foot problems
Okay.
since I had surgery.
Okay.
and I just have been a little shy about ordering from overseas.
Yeah. They can screw up sizing. We found that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how you go from a 32-inch waist to a 102-inch waist. I guess.
Yeah, the pair of M43 overpants that you and me and Laura probably all three could have fit in one.
These F-43s are horrible.
I'm working on it. That's my next project.
In the meantime, I have my clown pants when I'm desperate for them.
All right, Jenny, I'm curious as to you've got a pretty long run and a pretty diverse run. I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Well, my arch nemesis has been the Party City pinup. Every event I've done World War II has always been the Party City pinup as my arch nemesis. Because yes, she looks fantastic, but she's totally inaccurate. And where it hurts is that that's what photographers gravitate towards. And that's also what new reenactors gravitate towards. And they're like, I want to look like her. And when they finally come to me looking for help, it's like, we got to start over from scratch. And sometimes the first thing that they see and the first thing that they hear, learn, whatever it is, that sets the standard for them. That's what they're basing their whole impression around. And correcting that is really difficult to tell them that what you thought was right is actually wrong.
Yeah.
And then
Because especially with some of those people, they weren't even going after what they were looking. They weren't going after what the impression was, especially the photographers. They were going after the sex appeal.
Oh yeah, that photographers, I have my own personal problem with photographers. Here's a great example. I think it was Rockford of either in 2019 or 2020 had SS Hellfriend. And SS Hellfriend, you don't wear makeup. It's plain. And a photographer actually took my photograph. He gave me a breast enlargement, collagen, mascara, and lipstick in Photoshop. I looked like a phenomenal porn star, but I was so pissed because he took what was a really great impression and totally destroyed it. it was a little funny at the time, but it's funny now. It wasn't funny then. And as far as reproductions go, leather handbags. As when I mostly do civilian, I don't have, my handbag doesn't have to look like a particular item. But for the women that do these military impressions, what you girls will have to pay for a certain handbag is absolutely ludicrous. And I haven't seen anyone really reproducing those, or at least doing a good job of it. I know a couple guys, they did it for like a garage hobby, but there's no way they could have kept up with the demand.
For a Marine Corps purse, you're looking about $550 now.
Yeah.
Really
And she's right, civilian accessories are not reproduced. You might get a dress, but they don't reproduce accessories. I didn't even think about that.
That's a good idea, but that $550 price tag just hurt me somewhere deep.
The Marine Corps is not cheap anymore as it is.
No. All right, Elena, my little adopted sister.
I guess some of the things that I have had the most problem with is some of the guys just like kind of getting a little bit too friendly sometimes, like just getting really close and kind of inviting them into your personal space and stuff. Just them assuming that you are not in a relationship a lot of the times and trying to get with you and flirting with you. It's just gets annoying after a while because it's like sometimes you have like a few people following you every event, at least in my experience, especially at tacticals because there's even less women there. So as soon as they see me, they're just like, boom, right there. But luckily, especially with being with the 9th Guards, all of them are like my big brothers, so they always like push them away. So it's always really nice. But the only other thing that I have trouble with is like if I ever do civilian and stuff like that, they'll automatically start assuming stuff about like pretty much that's all I do. I have been told before to there is like I forget the exact battalion off the top of my head, but there's a battalion in the SS that was known for raping a lot of women, and I was told to be sent to that battalion before because I was wearing a civilian dress, and that one just really caught me off guard because it was just by this random person. I did nothing. All I was doing was just wearing a civilian dress, and I was told to do that. I think it's Durlevanger. I think that's what the battalion is, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure, but there you get some people like that. It's really discouraging, but I kind of just choose to ignore it because those are people that are kind of seeking attention and stuff like that, and it's just not worth giving them any attention. But in reproduction wise, I mean, I'm kind of looking to get a uniform made, but I don't know if you would have the option to do that, Bob, though, because it needs like this fabric from Germany or something because it would be for World War One. So
I am making World War I stuff for one person and one person only, and I'm doing that on the down low. And it's only because he's a very short, little, scary Italian man who finally, after almost 15 years of beating me about the head to do French stuff, I'm finally caving in this year.
Then he's practically family.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Like, yeah, he's been around forever.
And Sarah knows exactly what I'm talking about, too.
Very nice guy. Very scary.
Yeah.
So I want to go over some, because while we've been talking, I wanted to go over, I never see the comments on there, and these have been coming up. So I want these girls to know they are being heard too, and not just being typed. So Emma's been doing Civil War since she was 12, and almost feels like she was being bred to be the homemaker in the back of the camp, bringing the warm welcome, and feels like, yeah, I have to cut my hair and act like a man if I want to be accepted and go to some of this stuff. Others are just like, they can't even believe half of what we've been going through to get to the point where we are nowadays. And even Alex is like, too many women don't care about their impression or don't want to do immersion tacticals. I mean, I'm doing an event in 3 weeks, and because I'm not part of a men's unit, I can't even be in a barracks because my girls have to move our display because the women don't want to open the barracks to the public. They all go off and do their thing. And I was thinking too, listening to some of these and reading some of these, one of our biggest hurdles, I hate to say it, is Hollywood and the rockabilly movement. You have all of these period movies coming out, but the dramaturgs don't always do a good job. They want to make it look extravagant. And then you have rockabilly, which is a mixture of 40s and 50s. And there's a whole movement out there and these hideous polyester dresses. And then one girl's trying to come into 40s and she's dressed in rockabilly. And he's like, can I use this? No. Can I do this? No. Can I do this? Let me explain what you're looking for. And then she pulls out another rockabilly dress. And I'm like, this is not working. I spent a whole day trying to convince her that rockabilly was not 1940s European.
So
So-
the last question I've got, and I'm kind of letting this free fire at this point. When I started, and I think Sarah will back me up on this because we kind of came into it, or I think she had a couple of years on me. When I started, I can remember coming up in the Civil War world and telling all my dad's Civil War buddies I was in World War II. And you would have thought I was reenacting Al Qaeda. It was just so like beyond what so many people could comprehend. And after a 5-year break, I come back and I've discovered that it's probably the most popular era going in the US at this point. It's exploded by leaps and bounds. Having said that, I'm curious to see what you guys think. What are some good opportunities for women in the hobby on the horizon? Where do you see opportunity for you guys going forward?
Seriously, from what I'm seeing in a couple of people too, post-war stuff. Post-war is becoming history. I mean, older history is going out, partly because of politics, partly because it's not being taught. People are going to start reenacting stuff that is part of their lives, and there is access to all of those things. Mm-hmm. Like, if I want to do British, seriously, it's so much easier for me to get a British uniform from the 1990s than it is from the 1940s.
Right. I was thinking sticking solely within the World War II genre. There's got to
I don't know. There is no limit at this point.
Okay.
I mean, if nothing else, I would say women want to go out. Having a child didn't stop me from doing military because there were so many ways I could get Mary involved when I'm doing a military impression. But even now, and I was looking at what Emma was saying when she came out as 12, there weren't a lot of kids originally.
No.
It was mostly in the 19th century stuff. I'd love for Mary to come back out, like have more playmates in World War II, but it would be nice for the mothers to know they're not alone. What I do love about women is if you are a mother, you have a bunch of women with children and you watch each other at a reenactment. You're not the sole mother. The reenactment has become so open that everybody is watching the child. So you could do a home front impression and talk about domestic history, because believe me when I say domestic history is so overlooked. But becoming a mother doesn't have to stop a woman anymore from reenacting.
That's a good point, and I want to say and then I'll shut my fat yap and let the board talk. But I remember when I was 2013, and I thought, what am I going to do if I ever have a kid? There's no way I can bring her out to a World War II event. And then I got into doing some Civil War and some 18th century stuff, and I realized when I got back into World War II that I had far more opportunity to have Mary come out and do stuff than I ever would have doing anything else I had dabbled in. So that's a very good point.
Being Soviets welcomed the kids into camps. They were so near the villages and they loved the kids so much, the kids would come and feed. I mean, even looking at Stalingrad, getting a good hit of what I'm looking at, the kids were the only one who could move around Stalingrad because nobody wanted to hurt the kids. Even the Germans, who might pretend to scare them, were giving them food and allowing the kids to move, whereas they would attack the adults. So kids could be in a war zone, kids could be in a home front zone. I did ATS in America, and Mary was the girl coming on the boat while I was in Washington, D.C., because she was the child coming over to get away from the war. There are so many opportunities now. Okay. She could be a peasant girl when you guys are doing whatever in the countryside. For even GI, here we are in this village, and here is a child, because they don't want to hurt the kids.
The problem is all the guys in the unit are off the team then.
No, because you can boss them around.
That's right. Sarah, what do you think? I mean, you got to see some good stuff on the horizon.
Yeah, well, with the kids thing, just going off of that, I have a junior WAC uniform, and I know a bunch of people who buy it.
Mary sensory issues won't allow us to.
We'll talk.
I would certainly buy two. But I do see good things on the horizon. I do see expanding roles for women. There are some places I don't want to see expansion. I would like to see some impressions stay small on purpose because they weren't large for services. I'd like to see WASP stay small. It was a very small branch of service. I'd like to see SPAR stay small because it was a very small branch of service. It's not that these stories don't deserve to be told, but I don't want to see them overrepresented like war correspondent has become. When you have more people reenacting war correspondent than existed during the war, you have a problem. So,
and we kind of talked about that with the Marine Corps stuff.
Yeah, there's another issue there, but there's so much variety of uniforms there. I don't know what you would reproduce.
Yeah.
Maybe the whites, because that's what everybody seems to want. But again, that was a very rare uniform, and it was a private purchase uniform that you didn't see much of, only in the summer, under very specific rules on the grid.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do see a lot more stuff. I do see a lot more events. I was really upset by what Elena was saying about the men still having issues with men seeing reenacting as their personal dating service. I'd hope that it faded a little bit more than it had when we had started. But hopefully there'll be more progress with that and men understanding that women are there on their own and not to look for a man. I know that was a big thing when Diana and I started, that women were very much there to look for a man, and there were very few women who were just there on their own.
Yeah, they wouldn't take you seriously if you didn't have a boyfriend.
Right. They'd ask, well, who are you here with? Me, myself, and I. Yeah. I'm here as a part of a unit, but I'm not dating anybody. Oh, so you want to date me? No, I don't. Not at all.
There are.
And even Alexa's just like, if you don't cross-dress as a man, sometimes they just don't accept you still.
Yeah, well, Bob taught me one of my favorite words that I still use, and I'm going to introduce the wax to at training. That was sploozer.
Spaz meets loser.
Yeah. And I remember the first time you said it to me, I knew exactly that guy. I had a picture, and they're still there. And I have seen them in the hobby still. So if we could maybe work on lowering that margin a bit. I do see actually a lot fewer of them because there's a lot more social pressure on people not acting like that.
Yeah.
I do see more action in units on getting the creepers out. I don't see as much reaction from units when women speak out, but the men do seem to try to police themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad to see Sploozer is still living living on.
Absolutely. Other places, definitely with reproductions, they have gotten so much better that, they're out there. Yeah, it's just so vastly different than when I started. And actual units of just women.
That was a big one.
Yeah. I remember Diana with the ATS unit is one of the first. And then Molly and the whole whack thing that came out, and that was really cool. I'm sorry, I keep talking with my hands, but that's because I'm Italian. I have to sit on.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. That's been huge, seeing actual units of women doing things. And I know we're going to see more of that. I'm hoping to see a Waves aircraft unit at some point doing aircraft maintenance stuff. Even though it's not completely appropriate, I love seeing Waves work the boats at D-Day. Just to see a group of women working together on something task-oriented like that. There's just some neat stuff that's happening like that with women actually finding a functioning role at events. I like that. And I want to see more of that, and I see more of that at events. So that's what I see coming for us in the future.
Cool.
Yeah, and just to let you know, JoJo says she hasn't exactly chosen an impression yet, but she thanks you and Jenny for helping her find reading material.
I see that. You're welcome. And I thank you for being receptive because you've been awesome.
All right, Stormy, what are you seeing on the horizon down in the South?
So we're still definitely trying to get more women interested in the hobby at all. But I think that there's so many, almost all male units now are welcoming and inviting and encouraging of having accurate women's impressions out there. And for all the right reasons, they want to see accurate whack impressions happening. That, it's just a matter of showing up, investing your time and your research to making that good impression, and whatever you want to do, like, you can go do it now. Nobody's going to tell you can't come to this tactical, or you can't set up at this event or whatever. So we're really just limiting ourselves. So as long as we stop doing that, world's our oyster. The World War II world is our oyster.
Hannah, what do you say? You've got the still got the new reenactor kind of role. What do
Smell
you
on
see?
me, yeah. I think so. I used to live in North Carolina, and then now I moved back to Georgia. No, this is my first time living here. Moved to Georgia, and World War II is not a thing down here. I meet people who seem like weird history people, and they are, and they're like, "Oh, what do you reenact? Civil War?" No, it's just World War II, and I kind of deflate when I say that, which is quite sad. So growth down here, I'm trying to help with that. I don't think there is a limit to the, Stormy was saying the only thing that really limits is ourselves. And so we need to make sure that we are doing better in what we have learned and what we can learn, to make sure that we are still we're not getting complacent, because it's very easy to get lazy and just stick to what you know and not try to do better in even the simplest tasks of like a whack would have or anything. So I think it's brilliant. Most everybody that I have met, all the men seem to be very helpful and very encouraging, and yeah, we're glad that you're here, and truly mean it, not just kind of brush it off. Yeah, you're here. So to me, there's not really any limitations, but ourselves, like Stormy said.
Okay. Laura, what are you seeing on the horizon?
I am looking forward to seeing what happens with the 688 movie. There was a group of African American reenactors, and one of them did Army Nurse. I saw her once at Ike Farm, and her kit was all original, and she had everything, including the cape.
Wow.
And just having room for more people in the hobby, and hopefully this new Netflix movie will. And I sort of hope it doesn't have the Band of Brothers effect with Whack,
Yeah.
but
What does that do out?
I don't think they've really announced a date yet,
Okay.
not that I've seen, and I figured my Facebook newsfeed would sort of blow up when they announced a date.
Yeah.
It's coming
So
out next spring.
In
It's
May?
next spring. They're targeting for next March.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll know what to expect and prepare ourselves.
yes, I'm looking forward to seeing what Bob makes and what Bob's contacts can make for us, because I think there's definitely some room for improvement. And
Yeah, we were hoping to get 50-yard sample. Instead, we got a 1 foot square.
That wasn't convenient.
But it was amazing fabric. I mean, it felt just like the original uniform.
yes, the pictures that Bob sent last night, I looked at my phone this morning and I'm like, holy crap.
I got touchy-feely. It felt so nice compared to the original uniform.
So I'm definitely looking forward to feeling the fabric in a couple of weeks and just seeing how things go. But I'm
Slow and steady wins the race. We
exactly.
have 300 yards of it coming.
Oh, all right. Jenny, what do you see on the horizon from the German standpoint?
Well, I don't really know what the future holds. The cat broke the crystal ball, little bugger. But for me, I would really like to see more German or European home front. When I go to these reenactments, I see a lot of the women that do choose to do German go with either DRK or some nurse impression or another uniformed impression. and there seems to be some obsession with nurse. I haven't figured that one out myself, but I feel like civilian is really underrepresented. I mean, for the uniformed impressions, these women started as civilians, and then when the war ended, some of them went back to being civilians. And I feel like the civilian portion is getting kind of scrubbed out of history a little bit with the German side, because the uniforms, everyone wants to wear one, and they are sexy. And the civilian side is plain, it is boring, it is not glamorous. And women at these events, they do like to dress up, and I can't blame them for it. I know I do, but I would like to see more European home front, because these women faced really heavy rationing, really heavy restrictions. Some of them were living in war zones, whereas in the U.S. it was pretty comfortable. And I think I would like to see more of that make do and mend from the German perspective, like not the synthetics. Well, no, yeah, maybe synthetics, the ersatz. That when you had to make do with what you had, and sometimes the substitutes really sucked, but they still made it work. Some of them, their creativity was pushed to the limits, and it'd be great to see that at events.
Yes.
Yeah, I got to get you two together doing kind of a Soviet-German comparison. I think that would be kind of a cool program to see.
Yeah, I pull Soviet Homefront out once a year. And I have a nice rundown area that is my bombed out apartment in Leningrad.
All right, Elena, you want to bring us home?
I feel like, of course, like there's a huge rise of women in Soviet for Red Army, which is really good. I'm very happy to see it, because ever since I joined the Guards, I feel I have seen at least a new woman at every other event now, which is wonderful. I love being able to see it, because there's so many more of us now, and I get to see a lot of them fighting in the fields, and I really love it. I really do. And it's nice that a lot of them too are also like new to the hobby, so a lot of them are younger and getting into it, and I'm glad that they feel very welcomed, especially with the Guards, because I know I felt welcome with the Guards, so I'm glad I could do that for others. But I also think that outside of World War II, a possibility would be, I kind of seeing a bit of World War One coming back a lot. I am seeing like quite a bit of Imperial Russian, especially for women, but also too, of course, like nurses and stuff like that. But I think I'm starting to see a little bit of World War One being branched out to a bit more, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah. Apparently, I said, I told someone I will try French turned into I'm joining a French unit.
But no, she's got a point. Ever since the anniversary, more people are going back into World War One.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to close it out with what is the piece that the last thing we'll close out with, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions, but not much. What's one piece of advice you would give a new girl getting into the hobby?
Do your own research, find where you fit in, and don't take crap from anybody.
Sarah?
Don't listen to men. They don't know what they're talking about. Find a group of women that you like and stick with them and listen to them and read. Just keep reading. Read everything. Read anything. Just read nonstop. That's my advice.
I would say find a mentor, find somebody that you respect the quality of their impression, respect their leadership skills, and respect really their emotional intelligence for kind of navigating this world.
Hannah?
Have a good mentor, as Stormy said. Stormy was my mentor, and she did a wonderful job making sure I had all the information of, here's where to get the best piece of uniform, or here are the resources. And she kind of shoved them at me, and it was my job to do the reading. So she was very helpful in being helpful, but also making sure that I did my own research and not just handing it all to me. Also, find women that you enjoy to hang out with. Possibly have a place where serious, allied service women can come and share thoughts and ideas would be one of my biggest things that I would recommend, because that tends to get lost. There's lots of gatekeeping, as Sarah said, of good information that needs to get shared instead of just holding on to that treasure. We do need to share it. So share good information. Find a very good mentor like Stormy, and you'll do fine.
All right, Laura.
I totally agree with everything that's been said. I love the idea of like an allied service woman's canteen at an event where we can just go after hours and whine amongst ourselves and trade information. I've loved helping out Stormy and Hannah with Switchboard and helping Jason get their Switchboard up and running, and just I can't say enough about doing your own research. Nobody did the research for me. It was all finding it on my own, spending hours on newspapers.com and reading books. And that's the only way women are going to learn.
All right, Jenny, what advice would you give?
I'd say find something you're really passionate about and roll with it. Passion is infectious. You can spread it to other people. And do your own homework, meet as many people as possible, and ask questions. World War II, it's a huge topic. You're not going to know everything. No one knows everything. So the best advice I've got is the advice someone gave me, which was talk to as many people as possible, get to know them, kind of, ask questions, and for the love of God, stay out of Party City.
Yeah. I'm never going to forget Party City.
All right, Elena, you get to take it on. You get to give all the kids out there a piece of advice.
I guess for me, like, I find it easiest, especially if you want to get into it, start with a group. I think it'll help a lot because you'll have a lot of people around you to help you start out. It's a lot easier to do that than starting on your own, in my opinion. And then don't be afraid to branch out into impressions maybe that are lesser known just because they are lesser known. If nobody's going to talk about it, you should be the one to do it if you really are interested in it. Like me doing Polish, it's something nobody else does. That's why I love doing it, because it needs to be shared. And then don't be afraid to reach out to other women reenactors. It may seem a little intimidating, but do not be afraid, and do not be afraid to be dirty and get in tacticals, because trust me, it's a lot of fun, especially because you get to shoot all the boys. So you just get your payback then.
Mm-hmm. And going on what she said, I mean, when I did ATS, nobody was doing it.
Yeah.
And even on the old forums before social media existed, nobody had the research. It was me and my friend Jen in England. And we did the research and we put it together. And now, I mean, seriously, I just hang around and I hear about 3 other ATS units that are on the East Coast. But in my time, you just had to put the work in.
Right.
But we do have a lot of questions coming in.
So let's start with
Alexa, what women's impressions do we think are the most overrepresented? Ladies?
War correspondent. There are literally more of them now reenacting than there were in the actual war.
Yeah.
I'd say WASP. They're everywhere, and there wasn't really that many of them.
Yeah. But
German civilian. I only know of 2 other women that do it beside me.
I would say American pinup or just nurse in general.
The ones that were traditionally women's roles that allow them to do stuff without getting in trouble with the men. As someone seeking to become involved in the hobby, what is the best way to go about finding a unit to join? One of the best ways to do it is to go around to the reenactments, talk to the people who are there, especially those that have the interests you share, and just start talking to the different units. Get a feel for what those people are like. Anybody else?
You could do some online searches for your region too and see what's out there and look at their pages. If they have their own pages you could communicate on through Facebook or Instagram or something, you can look at their pictures and see if that's something you're into. Social media can be helpful, especially if you can't get out to an event or there aren't events close to you. It's hit or miss because social media can easily misrepresent a unit and doesn't give you the feel of what they're like after hours necessarily. So take your to leave it, use it as a starting point, but you and definitely go meet them afterwards. But it's a good place to start. You can definitely tell if they're posting articles with citations and actual history as opposed to, hey, look at us and our cool stuff. You know where their focus is. Or look at us having fun doing this random thing that has nothing to do with history.
Right.
Yeah. But that's one approach.
Anyone else?
That's pretty much exactly what I did. Originally, I was going to be doing German because I took 5 years of German in school. So I thought, it'd be nice to use that knowledge. But then, like, I talked to the people online and everything was fine. But as soon as I showed up, I kind of was just like, I'm not really feeling it. I just didn't feel it. But then at that same event, I met Maddie Fink and Greg Fink, who were actually with the 193rd for that event. But they introduced me to the 9th Soviet Guards. And that's how I got into it. Just through them and through those connections, just finding people at events and talking to them.
Anyone else?
I would recommend going with a friend. Reenacting can be a really overwhelming hobby. There are just a lot of different options. And it's nice to have that friend and that guide with you by your side explaining or trying to explain what it is you're looking at, what the options are, who is this, who is that. It is really helpful. I found my group through Facebook. It really was just dumb luck or fate. I got very lucky. I found a really great group, nice group of people, and I'm still with them. Those people are closer to them than my own family in some ways. And that was just Facebook. That was just dumb luck. I got very lucky, but it was very overwhelming getting into it and starting over from scratch. It would have been nice to have a friend to kind of guide me through it. That would have been helpful.
Bob, are we able to share with the people who attended the social medias of the groups that are represented here? So if anyone does want to reach out to any of us, they can.
Please get your stuff out there.
Yeah. And if you want them shared, we could even create a special link on our page that will help people find this information. So another question we had was from Angela, is the do your own research a barrier to entry that could be eased by compiling knowledge already gathered? When I'm saying do your own research, don't let your boyfriend tell you what this is about. Don't let your boyfriend say, hey, this is nursing, it's cool, and this is what the nurses did. It's, somebody's already compiled this information. That's where we all got it from, by reading personal accounts or other history books. It's just a matter of not letting somebody tell you. It's let them guide you in that direction and then find what was compiled and do your own reading so you have it all and probably details that might have been left out. Any other thoughts?
I do. Actually, I have a personal story. So when I started doing Civil War, I had a mentor. She kind of attached herself to me, and we were close, and she helped me get pieces together, led me towards resources, which at the time I thought were good. And my first year, I had sunk in hundreds of dollars into clothing and research materials that were actually terrible. This woman was actually a horrible mentor, and she put me in the hole. So as far as doing your own research, a professor of mine gave me good advice. Whenever you get a piece of, work or whatever, immediately go to the back of the book. Find out what source material that book used. Same thing with going online. Find out what source material they used. And doing your own homework. Not everybody is an expert in whatever field they have chosen. Some claim to know it all, and really they know jack squat. My first mentor, if I could go back in time, I really wish I had talked to other people, because it wasn't until like a year or so later that I talked to other people and they're like, yeah, she really is a terrible mentor. Yeah, we really should have taken you away from her. And I'm like, well, geez, guys, thanks. But part of it was my own fault. I took whatever she gave me, I took it as her word, because she had been in the hobby for at least 10 years more than I had been. But I really wish I had cross-checked her references and her source material. So that's, going to doing your own homework. Make sure that whatever mentor you've got actually knows his or her stuff. Not everybody does. It's a slippery slope.
And being the teacher, I have two things that I always tell my kids. Google is not a website, it's a search engine. And Wikipedia isn't always exact because it is written by anybody who wants to put something out there.
All right. Well, I don't think we're gonna wrap it up with this last
Yeah.
one from Scott, because I think it's a really good one.
All right, and then I just want to make sure Elena saw a comment too, but go ahead.
As a male unit leader, any advice on things that he should look out for in respect to having women on the roster?
If every single woman in your unit is telling you that one of the women is a problem, then she's a problem. It's really that simple. There's been a number of times where I've had a group of women where there was one woman was a problem, and we all talked to the person we were supposed to talk to, and they're like, "Oh no, I think you're all exaggerating," because they didn't understand. But really, seriously, no. If it's every single woman, it isn't. They're all agreeing, yeah, then she is the problem. And sometimes, if one guy is the problem, it's the same deal. If they're all saying this one guy is the problem, he's the problem. You got to listen.
Yeah, it may lead to some division in the unit. It may lead to a few problems, but you get rid of those problems, like that one person, those problems will resolve themselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But also keep an eye, because if they're going out and they're coming back visually upset, then something might have happened.
Yes.
And we need to get to the root of what happened, because I mean, we had some guy who just decided they wanted to take nude pictures of our girls, and they were trying to petition them.
Yeah. And the other thing is just because that guy acts a certain way towards you doesn't mean he's like that with somebody when he's not around you.
Yeah.
Because that's been a big thing too. He's like, "Oh, well, he's never like that around me or around my wife." He wasn't around you or your wife. He was around her by herself. That's different.
Yep.
And listen to them when they want to actually say, "Hey, I came across this research and I want to give this a try."
Well, yeah, that too. That's big.
Yeah,
with research.
that's what I was going to say is please take us seriously. Most of us have done a lot of research and we know what we're talking about. So when we show up to events, whether they be tabletop or tactical or anything, please take us seriously. We've done just as much research as you guys have. We're not just showing up to be the pretty face. We're actually showing up to be a soldier or a nurse or whatever we're portraying. We're here too, and we're trying to do this seriously, like you boys.
Mm-hmm.
If not more research.
Yeah. Okay. And then before I forget, Elena, there was, Angela was asking if you go into the comments, even when this is over, she has a Carolina Zabrowski. She has dabbled in some earlier World War II stuff and is Polish and lives there and has a YouTube channel you might want to try out.
Yeah. I watch her a lot, especially because she does a lot of Polish things. She does also do, I think, 19th century, I'm pretty sure too. So the 1800s, I think she delves into that as well. So she's actually really good. So I do watch her, yes.
And before we go, any woman out there are groups, even on Facebook and in social media, like some of the names are Reenacting Sisterhood, World War II Ladies Supporting Each Other. These are women-only groups. I mean, we have noticed in the past, you let a man onto a forum about women's stuff, and yeah, some men are interested in knowing about women's history. But when you want to get into personal, intimate stuff, they would always make fun of us and put inappropriate comments. So there are some, like these two groups I've said, don't even get me started on some of the comments, but like the Reenacting Sisterhood, World War II, is it women or ladies supporting each other? They're all women only. They are all time periods, and you need some help or guidance. There are a lot of knowledgeable women, including most of us on here, that belong to them that could guide you.
And I want to say one thing, because Stormy wanted to ask if she could put her unit information out. I'm not sure how you guys want to do it. You can put it in the comments, or if you send me the link, we could do I can run an advertisement for each of the groups, kind of a pinned post So folks that are coming to the page are like, oh, I live in Georgia and I want to do whack.
Mhm.
Well, there's Baker Company. Or I live in the Midwest and I want to do whack.
Yeah.
Well, there's Headquarters Company. Or I want to do Soviet. Well, there's Ninth Guards over there.
Yeah.
So we can figure out a way to make sure that you guys have a platform to advertise, because I wouldn't have had any of you on if you weren't the best at what you do. And you guys are truly the best, some of the best at what you do in this hobby. And I want to give you guys a chance to get your information out there.
Mhm.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming out. It's been great. I know it's a lot to ask folks on the Tuesday night to take an hour and a half of their time. So I won't keep you anymore,
Yeah.
but I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing all of you at some point in the future this season.
And real fast, if you came in late, this will be on Facebook for quite a few weeks. You can also find it in a couple of days. It'll be put up on the Leningrad Taylor page on YouTube, and you can get it from start to finish. And you can still send us comments either in personal message or in the videos if there are questions that were not answered, and we will get them. And like we said, this may be our last live video for a little while. If there's a roundtable you want to hear about, tell us. If there is something you want to tell us about, even if we don't do a live feed, we will get a video out there. Somebody wanted to do Women's Land Army in England. We are going to put that together sometime in the next couple of months between now and say the summer. Not exactly sure when, because things are going a bit crazy over here right now. Things are piling up. It may not be a live feed, but it will. Just keep an eye on the YouTube page, because that's where a lot of videos will be going up.
Yep.
And there will be announcements on Facebook when they do go up.
Sure. All right, guys. Well, you have a great one.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.